Okay, let's unpack the Roswell incident. How did a single report in 1947, about a flying disc near this small town in New Mexico,
Hmm.
just spiral into one of the biggest, most enduring mysteries?
Yeah.
Decades of debate about cover-ups and, yeah, aliens.
It's an absolutely fascinating case, isn't it? Because it's not just about, well, what might have actually fallen out of the sky. It's also about how that one event became such a cultural marker.
Exactly, shaped how we look at government secrecy, the possibility of something else out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really our mission today in this deep dive. You've given us this great stack of sources, articles, research, historical accounts, all trying to get grips with Roswell.
Yeah.
So our goal is to, cut through some of the noise.
Extract the really important insights.
Yeah, and help you understand all the different angles of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The history, the alleged evidence,
Mm-hmm.
the theories.
Everything. We're going to take a journey, basically, back to post-war America. Look at what happened on the ground in 47. Really dig into the descriptions of the debris, the very controversial claims about bodies, explore the different explanations, the official side, the media's role, and just how incredibly challenging it is to sort fact from fiction, even touching on some recent stuff.
Okay, so let's dive in. 1947. What was the world actually like then? Set the scene for us.
Well, post-World War II America, it was this incredible time, a real mix of like huge innovation, but also major anxiety.
Okay.
On one side, you had military and science just exploding. Early jets, radar getting way more sophisticated, a sense of pushing boundaries.
But a lot of that was secret squirrel stuff, right?
Yeah.
Happening behind closed doors.
Totally. The Cold War was heating up incredibly fast, intense fear of the Soviets, worry about what they were testing, so massive government and military secrecy.
Right. Classified projects everywhere.
Exactly. New planes, advanced tech, most of it top secret. And that whole atmosphere meant anything weird seen in the sky, well, it could immediately look suspicious. Was it ours? Was it theirs? Or something else?
Some people were seeing strange things back then already, weren't they? UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, that wasn't a totally new idea.
No, not at all. The sources show reports were coming in well before Roswell. And not just, random sightings. Credible people, pilots, military personnel, seeing things they couldn't explain.
So there was already a public awareness, kind of a mix of genuine curiosity and that Cold War paranoia, maybe.
Precisely. That's the backdrop. And into that environment, near Roswell, New Mexico, something crashes in the summer of 47.
What was the immediate military reaction? The sources talk about that.
Swift and incredibly controlled. That's the main takeaway. Forces from the local Army airfield, Roswell AAF, and maybe other units, they mobilize super fast.
Priority number one was security.
Absolutely. Lock down the site, keep civilians out, keep reporters away, stop any information leaks. That was paramount. And that rapid, tight control, it struck some people as unusual right from the start. More intense than for, say, a normal plane crash.
And then came that press release, the famous one.
Right. The initial official statement from the base public information officer. It said they had recovered a flying disc.
Not a rumor, an actual military press release.
Exactly. And this is absolutely crucial, that statement got yanked back almost immediately.
Like within hours.
Within hours, maybe a day at most. The official story changed completely. Now, they said it was just a weather balloon.
And that sudden U-turn, that's where the whole cover-up idea really sinks its teeth in, isn't it?
Yeah.
That immediate inconsistency.
That's the cornerstone, really. For so many people looking back, that jump from flying disc, something extraordinary, to weather balloon, something mundane, was the first huge red flag. Why the change? What were they hiding?
And then you add the local accounts. People living nearby, ranchers, folks just driving through. They started talking too.
Yeah, the sources mentioned these accounts, people who weren't connected to the base necessarily. They reported seeing strange lights maybe before the crash, or objects doing things planes couldn't do.
Like what?
Sudden speed bursts, sharp turns, hovering silently, things like that. Now, witness memory is always tricky, years later especially. But the sources do point out that sometimes you see consistency across different independent witnesses describing similar unusual things. And these often weren't UFO buffs, just people who saw something weird.
Okay, let's zoom in on the crash site itself. What do we know about the location and how the military handled being there?
Well, the area was pretty remote. Ranch land, open fields, maybe some rougher terrain. The environment itself, affects debris, how easy it is to find things.
Makes sense.
Which is why initial surveys and careful documentation would be important, though obviously access was super restricted.
And the military's methods on site. Sounds like they pulled out all the stops.
They really did, according to some accounts. Beyond just setting up roadblocks, sources talk about specialized teams coming in, suggestions of unusual gear may be used for scanning or recovery, and just intense efforts to keep everything under wraps.
Not just keeping people out, but keeping information in.
Exactly. And this is where disinformation likely comes in. That weather balloon story, that was just the beginning. The sources discuss deliberate efforts to manage the story, downplay what was found, maybe float other explanations later like experimental planes, and crucially, personnel involved were apparently sworn to secrecy, big time, under threat of serious consequences.
Wow.
Yeah, looking at reports from that time, you see signs of this intense control. Rapid deployment of specific units, maybe sudden communication changes, unmarked vehicles showing up. The key point is the sheer effort put into controlling the narrative around this event.
All right, let's shift to the alleged stuff they recovered. The debris. The descriptions in the sources are, well, they're pretty wild.
They really are. Forget like normal airplane wreckage. Sources have accounts describing material that seemed metallic but maybe incredibly light, yet also extremely strong, resistant to damage.
Like people couldn't bend it or burn it, stuff like
With
that.
those kinds of claims, yeah. Descriptions mention textures like smooth, almost like glass, or sometimes having weird patterns, maybe even shifting colors or being iridescent.
Nothing familiar.
Pretty much. Resistance to heat, impact, corrosion, that comes up. Some accounts even mention weird, subtle electromagnetic effects, layered construction, unusual density, properties that just didn't seem to line up with standard aircraft materials from 1947.
And if you looked even closer, microscopically.
Yeah, some sources get into alleged microscopic features, things like internal structures, maybe like a grid or a lattice pattern, or incredibly fine, precise layers.
Suggesting advanced manufacturing.
That's the implication. It's not just that they're small patterns, it's the suggestion of precision engineering, potentially way beyond what humans could do back then. If true, that detail alone is a huge point for the not from around here argument.
How would scientists even test something like that back then? Or analyze it now?
Well, you'd use very scientific tools, spectroscopy to see what elements are in it, microscopy to see the structure up close, chemical analysis. You'd test its physical properties, how it reacts to heat, stress, things like that.
And the key is comparing it to known stuff.
That's crucial. Compare it to aluminum alloys, steel, titanium, composites, whatever was used in planes or balloons in 47. And the accounts in these sources, they highlight the deviations. Unusual lightness for its strength, maybe trace elements or known elements in weird proportions that don't match Earth's geology, or those strange internal structures we mentioned, things that just didn't fit the known manufacturing processes of the day.
So when we hear about isotopic analysis, what does that actually tell us about where something might come from? Is it like a fingerprint?
Kind of, yeah. Think of elements like oxygen or lead having slightly different versions, or isotopes. They have different weights, basically.
Okay.
On Earth, the ratio of these different isotopes for any given element is pretty consistent, pretty well known. But out in space, maybe on other planets or asteroids, those ratios can be different because they formed under different conditions.
Ah, so if the isotope ratios in the debris were different from Earth's standard,
It could strongly suggest it didn't form here. It's like checking its atomic or planetary signature. Sources also mention looking for elements rare or unstable on Earth, but maybe more common elsewhere in the cosmos. Combine that potential evidence with the context finding it out in the middle of nowhere, no factories nearby, and the lack of, say, standard rivets or welding, it starts to build a case.
so the material evidence, based on these accounts, it's a massive point of debate.
Huge. Because if the materials genuinely had those properties and that kind of composition, it becomes very, very hard to explain using known Earth-based technology from that era.
Okay, now let's wade into probably the most controversial part, the claims about alien bodies.
Yeah, this is where things get really intense and, frankly, the most disputed. The idea that non-human bodies were recovered alongside the wreckage. It's absolutely central to many Roswell narratives.
And these claims fuel the whole cover-up idea like nothing else.
Absolutely. Allegations of bodies that didn't look human quickly whisked away to secret bases. These reports, more than maybe anything else, power the extraterrestrial explanation and the idea of a massive ongoing government conspiracy.
What about the civilian reports on this? Did ranchers or locals claim to see bodies?
Some accounts from early witnesses, like the rancher Mac Brazel, who found the main debris field, or others who might have seen the site, They sometimes include vague mentions of bodies or unusual figures, but often these are secondhand, or the details changed over time or emerged much later.
So tricky to rely on.
Very tricky. The sources themselves caution about this. Civilian accounts can be unreliable. Misidentification, rumors getting mixed into memory, exaggeration. You have to evaluate them really critically. Are the details consistent? Do they match any other evidence, even circumstantial?
Then you have the military testimonies,
Mhm.
people claiming they were directly involved. These are often presented as more solid, right?
They carry more weight for many researchers, yes. You have individuals who claimed, often decades later, that they were military or government personnel involved in the recovery, the transport, or maybe the examination of these alleged bodies.
IOSTAT accounts.
That's the claim. Seeing strange small bodies, helping load them onto trucks, being present at examinations, or being briefed by superiors. Sources discuss the immense pressure these people say they faced: ridicule, official denials, being sworn or even threatened into silence.
And the fact they came forward years later, despite that pressure, that's seen as significant.
It really is. Their persistence, sometimes risking their reputations or pensions, directly challenges the official story and keeps that extraterrestrial possibility firmly on the table for a lot of people.
But verifying these claims is still tough.
Incredibly tough. Decades later, without corroborating documents or other witnesses, memory can be faulty. People might conflate different events or stories they've heard. The sources acknowledge this verification challenge.
It's interesting, though, that even official government statements later on, while totally denying alien bodies, sometimes acknowledged, classified activities happened, or that some UAP sightings are genuinely unexplained and maybe even pose security questions.
Right, that gradual shift in official tone from outright dismissal and ridicule in the early decades to a more cautious stance recently,
Yeah.
that's a really key development the sources track. It adds a layer of seriousness to the whole UAP topic, even if they stick to denying Roswell aliens.
Okay, so trying to stitch all this together, the crash, the weird debris claims, the body stories, the military reaction.
Yeah.
What are the main theories people put forward to explain Roswell and UAP sightings generally?
Well, you can group them. One category is explanations based on natural phenomena.
Like weather stuff.
Yeah, unusual weather, atmospheric effects like mirages or temperature inversions, even things like ball lightning, these weird luminous spheres that move erratically and aren't fully understood. And of course, weather balloons, especially high-altitude ones. Reflections off them, unpredictable movements. They can definitely trick observers.
And the Project Mogul connection is huge here for the balloon theory.
Absolutely central. Many researchers and the later Air Force reports argue strongly for Project Mogul. This was a real top-secret U.S. project back then.
What was it for?
Using high-altitude balloon arrays, complex ones, not simple weather balloons equipped with sensitive microphones, to try and detect sound waves from potential Soviet nuclear bomb tests way up in the atmosphere.
Ah, so secret Cold War surveillance.
Exactly. And the theory is that the Roswell debris was actually wreckage from one of these Mogul balloon trains. They used unconventional materials like metallic-coated plastics or papers, special tapes, things that might look strange to someone unfamiliar with them.
And the secrecy of Mogul would explain the military's reaction.
Precisely. If a top-secret Mogul balloon came down, they would absolutely want to recover it quickly and keep it quiet. The weather balloon story becomes a convenient, less classified cover story, not covering up aliens, but covering up their own secret project.
Okay, that sounds plausible for the debris, maybe. What about the idea of secret experimental aircraft?
That's another big contender, discussed widely in the sources. 1947 was the dawn of the jet age, the cusp of supersonic flight. The U.S. military was definitely testing radical new aircraft designs. Things like early jets, the Bell X-1 rocket plane, maybe even stranger, classified prototypes.
Things that looked weird and flew fast.
Right, and again, extreme secrecy because of the Cold War. So if one of these experimental craft crashed or was seen flying erratically during a test, observers might report something truly bizarre, and the military would absolutely clamp down on any information getting out.
But do Mogul or experimental planes explain everything claimed about Roswell? Like the really weird material properties or alleged bodies?
That's the main challenge for those theories. While Mogul or secret planes could explain some aspects, the secrecy, maybe some of the debris descriptions, they struggle to account for the more extreme claims found in some sources. Materials that supposedly defied known physics or flight characteristics reported in other UAP cases that seem light years ahead of even secret 1940s tech, and neither explains bodies, obviously.
Which leads us, inevitably, back to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. ETH.
Right. This theory basically says what crashed wasn't natural and it wasn't human-made. It posits that the wreckage had properties, extreme resistance, weird composition, maybe those microstructures that point to technology far beyond human capabilities in 1947.
And it takes the more unusual witness accounts seriously.
Yes, it incorporates the accounts of strange materials, the descriptions of the object's alleged flight before crashing, if those reports are linked, and certainly the claims of non-human beings. For proponents, the intense government secrecy and decades of shifting explanations aren't covering up balloons or planes, they're covering up the ultimate secret: contact.
So it focuses on the anomalies, the things the other theories don't easily explain.
Exactly. It suggests the simplest explanation for technology that seems to defy known physics is, well, that it's not our physics, or at least not our application of it. It came from somewhere else.
The role of the military and the government weaves through this entire story, clearly.
Absolutely central. The sources spend a lot of time on how official agencies acted, both then and later. As we said, Project Mogul became the official explanation for the debris in those later Air Force reports in the 90s.
So the official story evolved, but it landed firmly on Mogul explaining the debris.
Yes. The argument presented in those reports is that the materials found by Brazil matched materials used in Mogul balloon trains, and the project's secrecy explained the initial flying disc confusion and subsequent cover story.
But critics weren't satisfied.
Not entirely. Critics, looking at the sources, point to gaps or inconsistencies. Do the official descriptions of Mogul debris perfectly match all the witness descriptions of the Roswell debris, especially the more exotic ones? How were witnesses handled? Why the decades of denial before the Mogul explanation surfaced? These discrepancies fuel skepticism that the official reports tell the whole story.
And the government definitely used tactics to shape the narrative, didn't they?
Oh, clearly. The sources describe a range of information control strategies: misleading statements, outright denials, reportedly confiscating evidence like photos or debris samples from civilians, discrediting or dismissing whistleblowers or witnesses who contradicted the official line.
Creating confusion.
Exactly, creating what some sources call a fog of misinformation. It makes it incredibly difficult for researchers, or for you, the listener, to get a clear, unbiased picture, and it certainly fostered decades of public distrust towards official statements on the topic.
What about declassified files? Have they cracked the case?
They've added pieces to the puzzle, but rarely a smoking gun for Roswell specifically. Files related to UAP investigations in general have been released over the years. They can show internal discussions, reveal the level of interest or concern within different agencies, track investigations.
But they're often incomplete.
Often incomplete, heavily redacted, and you need a lot of context to interpret them correctly. They offer glimpses into the historical handling of the phenomenon, but haven't provided that definitive answer for the Roswell incident itself.
Okay, this leads us to how the media and the public reacted, and just the sheer difficulty of investigating something like this.
Media was huge from day one. That initial Roswell Daily Record headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." Even though it was retracted fast, it lit a fire under the public imagination.
Went global pretty quick.
Instantly. Newspapers, radio, they spread the story, often sensationally, turning this local New Mexico event into a worldwide talking point almost overnight.
And Roswell became kind of the blueprint for the modern government cover-up conspiracy theory.
You could argue it's the foundational case, yeah. The narrative of concealment, mysterious wreckage, maybe bodies. It set a pattern, and these narratives evolve, tapping into Cold War fears back then, spreading like wildfire online now. They often play on existing distrust of authority, making critical thinking absolutely essential.
And pop culture just ran with it.
Oh, completely. Think about the X-Files, countless movies, books. Roswell is legendary. It's cemented in the public consciousness, often blurring the lines between documented accounts and pure fiction.
Making the idea of UFOs and cover-ups seem almost normal.
To an extent, yeah. It influences expectations, fuels interest, makes the actual town of Roswell a pilgrimage site. You have to recognize that cultural overlay when you're trying to separate the potential facts from the folklore.
So public perception has shifted over time, partly because of stories like Roswell and how they're told.
Definitely. Sources suggest a general drift over the decades, from maybe widespread skepticism about UAPs early on, towards more openness, perhaps even belief for some, driven by the internet, the cultural saturation, and more recently, those official government acknowledgments that, yes, there are things flying around we can't identify.
Let's talk about the inherent challenges in this kind of investigation. Witness testimony is crucial, but Tricky.
Incredibly tricky. Human memory isn't a perfect recording device, right? Especially decades after an event. Perception gets influenced by belief, by conditions at the time, by what you hear later. Stories can change, merge with other accounts.
So multiple witnesses help, but aren't foolproof.
Exactly. Multiple, independent, consistent accounts are more compelling. But sources stress you still need critical evaluation. Look for corroboration photos, documents, radar data, though maybe not from 47. Understand psychological factors too. Confirmation bias, where we favor info that fits our beliefs. Pareidolia, seeing patterns in randomness. Misidentification is common.
And physical evidence from way back then,
Yeah.
even harder to verify.
Oh, yeah. Huge challenges. If any alleged Roswell debris still exists, verifying its authenticity is a nightmare. How was it stored? Was it contaminated? What's the chain of custody who handled it over 70 years? And the potential for hoaxes is always there.
Past hoaxes have hurt the field's credibility.
Definitely. Sources mention this. Faked photos, planted evidence, it muddies the waters.
Yeah.
Verifying old photos or film footage with modern forensic techniques is also really difficult. It all just underscores why you need rigorous scientific method and a healthy dose of skepticism when looking at any physical claims.
So navigating this whole information landscape around Roswell, it sounds like trying to find your way through a maze in the fog.
That's a pretty good analogy. You've got serious research mixed with utter sensationalism, genuine confusion, honest mistakes, deliberate rumors, and maybe even active disinformation. The sources really emphasize how vital critical thinking is for you.
Like checking sources.
Checking sources, looking for multiple independent lines of evidence, understanding biases, being patient. Real research uses verifiable data and methods. Sensational claims often rely on emotion and lack solid proof. You have to learn to spot the difference.
Okay, let's bring it up to the present. Is there still active investigation into old cases like Roswell? New approaches?
Yes, definitely. There's been a real renewal of interest, partly spurred by the recent official UAP reports and hearings. Researchers are revisiting historical cases, including Roswell, sometimes with new tools.
Like what?
Better access to digital archives, maybe new analytical techniques for any potential materials analysis, though original verified Roswell material is the holy grail and likely non-existent publicly, using data mining on old reports. There's also more willingness to collaborate and challenge old assumptions.
And the government stance. It seems to be shifting towards a bit more transparency, maybe. Slowly.
It's a very gradual thaw. You see it driven by public pressure, congressional mandates, a move away from flat denial towards acknowledging some phenomena are real, unidentified, and warrant investigation. The Pentagon releasing those UAP videos was a big symbolic step.
Signaling it's okay to take it seriously now?
Kind of. It reduces stigma. But full proactive transparency on historical cases like Roswell, that seems unlikely in the near future. They're still focused on current potential threats.
How is modern tech helping UAP research overall, beyond just looking at old cases?
Massively. For current sightings, we have way better tools. High-res cameras everywhere, advanced radar, satellite imagery, AI and machine learning to sift through huge amounts of sensor data and look for patterns.
Helping sort the knowns from the unknowns.
Exactly. It makes it easier to identify balloons, drones, birds, atmospheric effects, and isolate the truly anomalous events. Plus, there's more interest now in bringing different fields together, atmospheric science, material science, even psychology to understand witness perception.
And this push for transparency and collaboration you mentioned, why is that so important now?
It's seen as absolutely crucial to make real progress and build public trust. For decades, UAP research was fragmented, secretive, often stigmatized. Now, the push is towards open data sharing where possible, researchers publishing methods and findings openly, international cooperation.
Moving it towards mainstream science.
That's the goal for many. An evidence-based approach, acknowledging uncertainties, fostering open debate. It involves not just scientists, but citizen scientists, journalists, the whole community working together more transparently.
All right, let's try and wrap this up. We've gone really deep into the sources you brought together on the Roswell incident. If you had to boil it down, what's the main thing for you, the listener, to take away from all this?
I think the core takeaway is just how complex Roswell is. It's not one simple thing. It's woven from the specific history of 1947, that post-war secrecy and anxiety mixed with witness experiences, these really extraordinary claims about materials and bodies, definite government actions to control information, and then layer upon layer of cultural interpretation over decades.
And the sources show strong cases can be made for different interpretations, right?
Exactly. You can look at the sources supporting the official explanation, Project Mogul, secret aircraft tests, and see how they explain some elements, especially the secrecy. But then you look at other accounts, the ones detailing alleged material properties that seem impossible for 47, or the flight characteristics sometimes mentioned.
And those keep the other possibilities alive.
They absolutely do. Those anomalies, those persistent elements that don't quite fit the conventional explanations, are why the extraterrestrial hypothesis just won't go away for Roswell.
And digging into these sources, it really highlights the challenges, doesn't it? Trying to verify stuff from so long ago, dealing with conflicting stories, potential misinformation.
It really shows you the detective work involved and why that critical thinking we talked about is so important. Understanding this whole saga, using these sources as a guide, it helps you develop the tools to navigate the UAP topic today, which is still full of mysteries and claims.
So as we finish this deep dive on Roswell, here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Given how incredibly hard it is to verify these old claims and how information, even now, trickles out so slowly, does the enduring mystery of Roswell tell us more about what might actually be out there? Or does it tell us more about ourselves, about our own deep-seated human need for answers when we face the genuinely unknown?
Or maybe put it another way, considering all the documented inconsistencies, the layers of secrecy that some sources suggest were definitely employed, is the Roswell story fundamentally about physics we don't yet grasp? Or is it maybe more about secrets? Secrets we were never really meant to uncover.
Something to think about. Keep digging, keep asking questions, and keep that critical eye sharp.